The nurse asked me for the third time how I got burned, and for the third time, I repeated the lie Richard told me to say. I was frying eggs this morning. The oil splattered. I wasn't paying attention. She wrote something on her clipboard without looking at me. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. And subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. I sat on the examination table in the emergency room at Toledo General Hospital, my left arm throbbing with a pain that made me want to scream. But I had learned over 32 years of marriage that screaming only made things worse. "Mrs. Davenport," the nurse said, finally looking up at me. Her name tag read, Jennifer, RN. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that reminded me of my sister Barbara. "I need you to remove your sweater so the doctor can examine you properly." My heart stopped. The sweater was hiding the other marks. The ones on my neck, the ones on my back, the ones on my right thigh. Richard had been very careful to make sure they were all covered by clothing, but now, in this cold room with fluorescent lights exposing everything, there would be no way to hide them. "I'm cold," I said, which wasn't a lie. I was freezing, but not from the temperature. "Can't the doctor just look at my arm?" Jennifer's expression changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The shift from routine procedure to something else. Suspicion, maybe, or worse, pity. "The doctor needs to do a complete examination, Mrs. Davenport. It's protocol for all burn cases." Richard was in the waiting room. He had driven me here himself, sitting next to me in the car with his hand on my knee, squeezing just hard enough to remind me what would happen if I told the truth. During the entire 15-minute drive, he had rehearsed the story with me like a director coaching an actress. "You were making breakfast. You weren't paying attention. The oil splattered. Simple. Don't add unnecessary details. Don't make it complicated." When we arrived, he had kissed my forehead in the parking lot, a gesture so gentle that anyone watching would have thought he was a devoted husband worried about his clumsy wife. But I felt his words whispered in my ear. "Remember what we talked about, Alice. Remember who pays the bills. Remember who Brandon will believe. Brandon, my son. The only reason I was still in this marriage." I removed the sweater slowly, exposing my arms first. Jennifer's eyes went immediately to my left arm, where the burn from last night was still angry and red, about 2 inches long, the perfect diameter of a cigarette tip. But then her gaze traveled to my neck, where an identical mark sat just below my jaw. Then to my right shoulder, visible through my tank top. And when she asked me to turn around, I knew she saw the one on my back, right between my shoulder blades. "Mrs. Davenport," she said, her voice now very quiet. "These burns, they all appear to be the same size and shape." "The oil splattered several times," I said, staring at the wall. "I should have been more careful." "Oil splatter doesn't usually create such uniform, circular burns," Jennifer said. She moved closer to me, and I could smell her perfume, something floral and clean. "Mrs. Davenport, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. Did someone do this to you?" The room was so quiet I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Each second was a chance to tell the truth. Each second was also a chance to destroy everything I had left, because if I told the truth, Richard would deny it. He would say I was mentally unstable, that I had done this to myself, that I had been acting strangely for months. And Cynthia, my daughter-in-law, would back him up. She was a nurse after all. She would know exactly what to say to make me sound crazy. And Brandon, my beautiful boy who I had raised alone while Richard spent every paycheck at the casino, Brandon would believe his father, because he always had. I thought about the $87,000 I had spent on Brandon's college education, money I had earned working double shifts as a high school English teacher, while Richard gambled away his salary from the car dealership, money I had borrowed and scrimped and saved, eating ramen noodles for dinner so my son could have a degree, so he could have a better life than I had. And now that son was married to a woman who called me twice a week asking for money. For rent, for car payments, for medical bills. Always something. And I always gave it to her because I was terrified that if I said no, I would lose my son forever. "Mrs. Davenport?" Jennifer's voice brought me back to the present. "Did you hear my question?" "I burned myself cooking," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "That's what happened." Before Jennifer could respond, The door opened, and a woman in a white coat entered. She was older, maybe late 40s, with gray streaks in her dark hair and an expression that said she had seen too much in her career to be fooled easily. "I'm Dr. Karen Ellis," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Let me take a look at what we have here." She examined each burn carefully, not saying anything for almost 5 minutes. I watched her face, trying to read what she was thinking, but doctors are good at hiding their thoughts, just like abused wives are good at hiding their bruises. Finally, she stepped back and folded her arms. "Mrs. Davenport, I've been an emergency room physician for 23 years. I've treated hundreds of cooking-related burns, oil splatter, steam burns, hot pan contact. You know what I've never seen?" I didn't answer. "I've never seen oil splatter create 7 perfectly circular burns, all approximately the same diameter, all with the same depth of tissue damage, distributed across 4 different areas of the body." She paused. "But you know what does create burns exactly like these? Cigarettes." The word hung in the air like smoke. "My husband doesn't smoke," I said automatically, which was true. Richard had quit smoking 10 years ago, but he had started again 3 months ago, hiding it from everyone. "Everyone except me, Mrs. Davenport," Dr. Ellis said, sitting down on the stool and rolling closer to me so we were at eye level. "I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you're in danger. These burns are consistent with intentional harm. They are not accidents. And I am legally obligated to report this to the authorities if I believe you are being abused." My chest tightened. "Please don't," I whispered. "Please. You don't understand. Your son would want you to be safe," Dr. Ellis interrupted. "You don't know my son," I said, and I heard the bitterness in my own voice. Before Dr. Ellis could respond, there was a knock on the door, and it opened without waiting for permission. Richard stood in the doorway, and behind him, dressed in her nursing scrubs with her hospital ID still hanging around her neck, was Cynthia. "Alice, honey, are you okay?" Richard said, rushing to my side with an expression of concern that would have won him an Oscar. "They've had me waiting out there for 40 minutes. What's taking so long?" Cynthia moved to my other side, her hand on my shoulder. "Mom, we've been so worried. How bad is the burn?" Dr. Ellis stood up slowly, her eyes moving from Richard to Cynthia and back to me. I could see her calculating, weighing her options. "Mr. Davenport," she said coolly, "your wife has sustained 7 burns that require treatment. We'll be admitting her overnight for observation." "Overnight?" Richard's voice had an edge to it now. "For cooking burns? That seems excessive." "It's protocol for multiple burn sites," Dr. Ellis said. "We need to make sure there's no infection and that she's managing her pain appropriately." Richard's hand found mine, and he squeezed it so hard I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. "Of course, doctor. Whatever my wife needs. We just want her to be comfortable." Cynthia leaned down and whispered something in Richard's ear. I couldn't hear all of it, but I caught fragments. "Tuesday has to be signed. And we can't lose the house." My blood went cold. What had to be signed by Tuesday? What house were they going to lose? Dr. Ellis noticed my reaction. "Mrs. Davenport needs to rest now. You can visit during regular hours tomorrow." "But I'm her husband," Richard protested. "And I'm her doctor," Dr. Ellis said firmly. "She needs rest. You can see her tomorrow." After they left, after the door closed and I was alone with Dr. Ellis and Jennifer, the doctor sat down again and took my hand gently. "Alice," she said, using my first name for the first time, "I don't know your whole story, but I know what I saw, and I know that whatever happened to you, it wasn't an accident." She paused. "I'm not going to force you to tell me the truth right now, but I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number, and I'm going to tell you something my mother told me when I was in a similar situation 25 years ago." I looked up at her, surprised. "She told me that staying silent doesn't protect the people you love. It only protects the people who hurt you." She wrote her number on a piece of paper and pressed it into my palm. Then she left, leaving me alone in that cold examination room with 7 cigarette burns on my body, and a truth I was too terrified to speak. They released me from the hospital the next afternoon with prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotic cream, plus a follow-up appointment I knew I would never make. Dr. Ellis had tried one more time that morning, standing at the foot of my bed with her arms crossed and her expression grave. "Alice, once you leave here, I can't protect you. Please reconsider filing a report." But Richard was already in the hallway, and I could hear his voice talking to the discharge nurse, that charming tone he used with everyone except me. So I thanked Dr. Ellis, folded the paper with her phone number into my pocket, and prepared to go home. The car ride was silent. Richard drove with both hands on the wheel, his jaw tight, staring straight ahead. I knew that silence. It was the dangerous kind, the kind that came before an explosion. But we made it home without incident, and when we pulled into the driveway of our 3-bedroom house on Maple Street, the house I had lived in for 28 years, I saw Brandon's Toyota parked on the street. "Good," Richard said, his first words since leaving the hospital. "He's here." My stomach dropped. "Why is Brandon here?" "Because his mother had an accident, Alice. Why wouldn't he be here?" Richard's tone was casual, but there was something underneath it, something rehearsed. Inside, Brandon was sitting at the kitchen table with Cynthia. They had made coffee, and the smell filled the house with a false sense of normalcy. Brandon stood up when he saw me, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy I had raised, the one who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares. "Mom," he said, crossing to me and pulling me into a careful hug, avoiding my bandaged arm. "We were so worried. Dad called us last night from the hospital." "I'm fine," I said, though the pain medication was wearing off and every movement hurt. "It was just a silly accident." "7 burns from one accident?" Cynthia said from the table, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "That must have been some scary oil splatter." I looked at her. She was wearing her scrubs, the light blue ones from Toledo Medical Center where she worked in the cardiac unit. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she looked fresh and competent and completely in control. Everything I wasn't. "It happened fast," I said weakly. "Well, that's why we're here," Brandon said, guiding me to the table and pulling out a chair. "We want to help you recover. Cynthia took the week off work, and we're going to stay here and take care of you." The week off work. Cynthia never took time off work. She complained constantly about needing money, but somehow never had enough shifts. "That's not necessary," I said, sitting down carefully. "I can manage." "Mom, you can barely move your arm," Brandon said. "And Dad has to work. You can't be alone right now." Richard appeared in the doorway, and I saw the look he exchanged with Brandon. Brief but significant. They had planned this. "I think it's a great idea," Richard said. "Your mother needs help, and who better than family?" Over the next 3 days, Brandon and Cynthia took over my house. They cooked meals I barely ate. They helped me change my bandages. They asked me constantly how I was feeling, if I needed anything, if I was comfortable. It should have felt like love, but instead it felt like surveillance. On the 3rd day, Tuesday morning, I woke up early with a throbbing headache. The pain medication made me foggy, and I had been taking it regularly because Cynthia insisted, bringing me pills with water at exact intervals. But that morning, something felt wrong. Off. I got up slowly and went to the bathroom. In the mirror, I looked terrible. My eyes were puffy, my skin pale, and the burns on my neck had started to scab over in an ugly way that made me want to cry. I was 59 years old, and I looked 80. When I came out, I heard voices downstairs, low and urgent. I moved to the top of the stairs and listened, something I hadn't done since Brandon was a teenager sneaking out at night. "Has to sign today," Cynthia was saying. "The bank called yesterday. If we don't have the second mortgage paperwork completed by 5 p.m., they're going to foreclose." "She's not thinking clearly," Richard said. "The medication is helping with that." "But what if she reads it?" Brandon asked. His voice sounded worried, uncertain. "What if she realizes what she's signing?" "She won't," Cynthia said firmly. "Trust me, Brandon. I know what I'm doing. The dosage I've been giving her is just enough to keep her compliant, but not enough to be obvious. She'll sign, and then we can move forward with the rest." "The rest? What rest?" "And the power of attorney?" Richard asked. "Same document," Cynthia said. "Once she signs, you have complete control over her finances and medical decisions. If she tries to cause problems later, We have options. Options. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. I don't know, Brandon said. This feels wrong. She's my mother. Your mother who guilt-tripped you your entire life, Cynthia snapped. Your mother who held that college money over your head for years, reminding you how much she sacrificed. Well, now it's our turn, Brandon. We have a chance to actually build something here. The house is worth $310,000 free and clear. Your father gets his gambling debts paid off, and we get enough to finally buy our own place. Everyone wins. Except my mother, Brandon said quietly. Your mother will be fine, Richard said. She'll be taken care of. There's a very good facility in Oak Hills that specializes in older adults who need assistance. Oak Hills. I knew that name. It was a psychiatric facility on the edge of town, the place where they sent people who couldn't take care of themselves, or people whose families wanted them out of the way. I backed away from the stairs slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I went back to my bedroom and closed the door as quietly as possible. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to think through the medication fog. They were going to make me sign papers. Papers that gave Richard control of everything. Papers that would let them put me in a facility. And they had been drugging me to keep me compliant. I looked at my purse on the dresser. Moving carefully, I opened it and started searching through the contents. Wallet, keys, old receipts, lipstick I never wore anymore. And then, at the bottom, folded into a small square, I found it. A power of attorney document, already filled out, every line completed except for one thing, my signature. The date at the top was today's date, Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. My hands shook as I unfolded it completely. It gave Richard Davenport complete and irrevocable authority over Alice Marie Davenport's financial accounts, property, and medical decisions. There was a second page attached, a document authorizing the sale of the property at 847 Maple Street, Toledo, Ohio. They were going to take my house, the house I had paid the mortgage on for 28 years while Richard gambled. The house that should have been paid off 10 years ago but wasn't because Richard kept taking out new loans against it. I heard footsteps on the stairs, Brandon's voice calling, "Mom, are you awake? We made breakfast." I shoved the papers back into my purse and stood up, trying to look normal, trying to look medicated and compliant and easy to manipulate. When I opened the door, Brandon was standing there with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There you are," he said. "We were getting worried. Come downstairs. Cynthia made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." He put his arm around me as we walked down the stairs, and he squeezed my shoulder gently. "Mom, you know I'll always protect you, right?" I looked at him, this man who used to be my little boy, and I saw a stranger. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I know." At the bottom of the stairs, I glanced at the side table and saw Brandon's phone lying face up, a message notification visible on the screen. "Remember the plan. After she signs, she goes to Oak Hills. They're expecting her Friday. 3 days. They were giving me 3 days. I didn't eat the blueberry pancakes. I pushed them around my plate while Cynthia watched me from across the table with those sharp nurse eyes, the ones that could spot a patient trying to hide their pills under their tongue. "You need to eat, Mom," Brandon said. "You need your strength to heal." But I had stopped taking the medication that morning. I had flushed the pills down the toilet and filled the bottle with aspirin from the medicine cabinet, same white color, close enough that no one would notice unless they looked carefully. And nobody was looking carefully at me anymore. They were just looking at what I represented. Money, property, an obstacle to remove. By Tuesday afternoon, the fog in my head started to clear. It was like waking up from a nightmare, except the nightmare was still happening all around me. Richard came home from the dealership at 4:30 p.m., earlier than usual, and I knew why. The bank deadline was 5 p.m. "Alice, honey," he said, sitting down next to me on the couch where I had been pretending to watch television. "We need to talk about some paperwork. Just routine stuff, but it needs to be signed today." Brandon and Cynthia materialized from the kitchen like actors waiting for their cue. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked, keeping my voice weak and confused, the way I had sounded for the past 3 days. "Just some financial documents," Richard said smoothly. "The bank needs updated signatures on the mortgage. You know how they are with their bureaucracy." "I'm so tired," I said, letting my eyes drift closed. Can we do this tomorrow? I felt Richard's hand tighten on my knee, that familiar pressure that meant danger. It has to be today, Alice. The bank is very insistent. Then you sign it, I mumbled. You handle all that stuff anyway. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. I opened my eyes just slightly and saw the look that passed between Richard, Brandon, and Cynthia. Panic, quickly masked. Alice, Cynthia said, her voice taking on that professional nurse tone. You're not thinking clearly. That's normal after what you've been through. Why don't I get you your medication? It'll help you feel better, and then you can look at the papers. No more medication, I said. It makes me feel strange. That's just the healing process, Cynthia insisted, already moving toward the kitchen where they kept my pills. But I stood up, swaying slightly for effect. I need to rest. My arm hurts. We can deal with paperwork tomorrow. I walked toward the stairs, and behind me I heard Richard's voice, low and angry. We don't have until tomorrow. I made it to my bedroom and locked the door. Then I sat on the floor with my back against it and tried to figure out what to do with a mind that was finally, terrifyingly clear. I had no money. Richard had emptied the accounts. I had no car. Richard had the keys to the Honda, and Brandon had blocked in my car with his Toyota. I had no phone. Mine was downstairs on the kitchen counter, and I knew if I went to get it, they would be watching. But I had something else. Something they didn't know about. 23 years ago, when Brandon was 11 years old, I had written him a letter. Not a birthday card or a casual note, but a real letter, 3 pages long, explaining something I thought he was old enough to understand. It explained why I couldn't afford to take him to Disney World that year, why we ate pasta and rice most nights, why I worked 2 jobs and still sometimes couldn't pay the electricity bill on time. I had explained, in careful detail, that his father had a gambling problem, that I had spent $23,000 over 5 years paying off Richard's debts to bookies, to casinos, to loan sharks who called our house at midnight. I had explained that I was trying to protect our family, that I loved his father, that I hoped things would get better. But I had also written, Brandon, if anything ever happens to me, if I'm not around to tell you the truth, I need you to know that every sacrifice I made was because I loved you, not because I wanted to hold it over you, not because I wanted you to owe me, but because that's what mothers do. I had put that letter in a white envelope and sealed it and written, to Brandon, open if something happens to Mom on the front. And then I had hidden it in the one place I knew it would be safe. Inside the hardcover copy of To Kill a Mockingbird on my bedroom bookshelf, the book I had used to teach American literature for 30 years, the book no one in this house had ever touched except me. I pulled the book from the shelf now, my hands shaking. The letter should have been there, pressed between pages 174 and 175. The chapter where Atticus talks about courage. The letter was gone. I flipped through every page. Nothing. I checked the other books on the shelf. Nothing. I looked under the bed, in the closet, through every drawer in my dresser. Gone. And then I understood. Cynthia had found it, probably years ago, when she and Brandon first started dating, when she was spending time in this house, learning its secrets, figuring out how to turn my son against me. She had found the letter and taken it, because a letter like that would have ruined her plans. A letter like that would have shown Brandon that his mother wasn't a martyr guilt-tripping him, but a woman trying to survive. I sat on the floor surrounded by books and felt something inside me break. Not my heart. That had broken long ago. Something deeper. The last thread of hope that maybe, somehow, my son still loved me underneath all of Cynthia's manipulation. But Brandon had seen that message on his phone. After she signs, she goes to Oak Hills. He wasn't being manipulated. He was participating. There was a knock on the door. Mom? Brandon's voice. Can I come in? I stood up slowly, put the books back on the shelf and wiped my face. Then I unlocked the door. Brandon stood there holding a piece of paper and a pen. Behind him, I could see Richard and Cynthia at the top of the stairs. Mom, I know you're tired, but this really can't wait. The bank closes in 20 minutes. Please just sign this one paper. That's all. Then you can rest. He held out the paper. I could see it was the power of attorney document, but only the signature page. folded so I couldn't see what I was actually signing. "What is it?" I asked. "Just a mortgage renewal form," Brandon said. Dad explained it all. "The bank needs it today." I looked at my son, really looked at him. He had my eyes, but everything else was Richard. The way he stood, the way he lied so easily, the way he thought I was stupid enough to believe him. "Brandon," I said quietly, "do you remember when you were 8 and you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball? You lied to me about it. You said it wasn't you. But I knew it was you because you couldn't look me in the eye when you lied." He blinked. "Mom, what does that have to— Look me in the eye, Brandon. Look at me and tell me this is just a mortgage renewal form." He looked at me, and I saw it. The flicker of guilt, just for a second, before he buried it under Cynthia's training. "It's just a mortgage form, Mom. Please sign it." I took the pen from his hand. Then I wrote in large letters across the signature line, "Forged document, signed under duress. Alice M. Davenport, 8/27/24. Brandon's face went white. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. "From my own family." Richard appeared in the doorway, his face red with rage. "You stupid woman! Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I've just saved my life." Richard lunged forward, and I saw his hand go to his pocket, reaching for the lighter he always carried, the one he had used to burn me 4 days ago. Richard's hand closed around the lighter, but before he could pull it from his pocket, Brandon grabbed his father's arm. "Dad, no, not here, not now." The 3 words that told me everything. Not here, not now, but somewhere else, at another time. My son was stopping his father not because burning me was wrong, but because it was inconvenient. "Get out of my way, Brandon," Richard snarled. "Think about it," Brandon said urgently. "She just wrote all over the document. It's evidence now. If anything happens to her, that paper proves we tried to force her." Cynthia appeared behind them, her phone in her hand. "He's right, Richard. We need to be smart about this." Richard's face was purple with rage, but slowly, very slowly, he released the lighter and let it drop back into his pocket. He pointed a finger at me, and his voice was cold. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Alice." "No," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "The biggest mistake of my life was staying married to you for 32 years. They left. All 3 of them, thundering down the stairs, and I heard the front door slam hard enough to shake the house. Through my bedroom window, I watched them get into Brandon's Toyota and drive away, probably to regroup, to plan their next move. The moment they were gone, I moved fast. First, I went downstairs and found my phone on the kitchen counter. 17 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Richard calling from different phones, trying to reach me during the hospital stay. I ignored them all and went to my contacts. Dr. Karen Ellis had said to call if I needed help. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket, the one she had given me with her personal number, and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "This is Dr. Ellis. It's Alice Davenport, from the emergency room. The cooking burns." A pause. Then, "Alice, are you safe right now?" "I am for the moment. They left. But I need help, and I don't know who else to call. Tell me what's happening." So I did. I told her everything. The drugging, the power of attorney, the plan to commit me to Oak Hills, the stolen money, the conspiracy. I told her about Brandon's message and Cynthia's nursing knowledge and Richard reaching for the lighter not 10 minutes ago. When I finished, Dr. Ellis was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Alice, I'm going to give you the number of an attorney I know. Her name is Patricia Morse. She handles domestic violence cases pro bono for women who can't afford legal help. She's very good. And more importantly, she's fearless. I want you to call her right now and tell her I sent you." "I don't have any money," I said. Richard emptied the accounts. "Patricia doesn't need money up front. Call her. And Alice, document everything. Every bruise, every threat, every conversation you can remember. Write it down with dates and times. Take pictures. Save messages. You're going to need evidence." After I hung up with Dr. Ellis, I called Patricia Morse. She answered with a brisk, professional voice that immediately made me feel safer. Ms. Morse, my name is Alice Davenport. Dr. Karen Ellis gave me your number. I need help. Tell me what's happening, Alice. I went through the story again, faster this time, and when I finished, Patricia said, I can take your case, but I need you to do exactly what I tell you, and I need you to do it quickly. Do you have a way to leave your house? My car is here, but I don't have the keys. Where are the keys? I thought about it. Richard keeps all the keys on a hook in the garage, but I don't know which one is mine. He took them from me months ago. Try them all if you have to. But first, documentation. Do you have a camera? My phone. Perfect. I need you to photograph every single burn with today's newspaper in the frame so we can prove the date. Then I need you to photograph that power of attorney document you wrote on. Then I need you to go through your house and photograph anything that might be evidence. Bank statements, threatening messages, anything. Upload everything to a cloud service right now, not just your phone. If they take your phone, I want that evidence backed up. For the next hour, I worked with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I photographed the 7 burns from multiple angles, holding up today's Toledo Blade newspaper. The burns were healing, but they were still visible, still obviously intentional. I photographed the ruined power of attorney document. I went through the filing cabinet in Richard's home office and found bank statements showing the $7,500 in withdrawals. I found the secret second mortgage paperwork for $125,000. I found credit card statements showing thousands of dollars charged at casinos over the past 2 years. And then I found something else, a folder labeled Oak Hills Psychiatric Facility with paperwork inside, intake forms already filled out with my information, medical history forms claiming I had dementia, paranoid delusions, and a history of self-harm, all completely fabricated. There was a letter from a Dr. Robert Lehman that I had never heard of, stating that he had evaluated me and found me to be a danger to myself and others, recommending immediate psychiatric commitment. I had never met Dr. Robert Lehman. I had never been evaluated by anyone except Dr. Ellis. My hands shook as I photographed every page. At the bottom of the folder was an email printout, from Cynthia to Richard, dated 3 months ago. Richard, I spoke to Dr. Lehman at Oak Hills. He's willing to sign the commitment papers based on our documentation. Cost is $5,000 cash, paid before admission. Once she's in, she'll be evaluated by their staff. But Lehman says with the right medical history, they'll keep her as long as we need. Could be months before any hearing. By then, the house sale will be complete. Let me know when you have the cash ready. See, 3 months. They had been planning this for 3 months. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud services, then emailed copies to Patricia Morse. Then I went to the garage. The key hook had 8 keys. I tried them all in my Honda. The 5th one worked. I was putting my purse in the passenger seat when I heard tires on the driveway. Through the garage window, I saw Brandon's Toyota pulling in, blocking my exit. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to stay calm. I got out of the car and walked back into the house through the garage door, trying to look casual. Brandon came in through the front door alone. His face was different now, harder. The mask was completely off. Where do you think you're going, Mom? I was just checking if my car still runs, I said. I haven't driven it in weeks. Give me the keys. Brandon, give me the keys. His voice was sharp, angry. This wasn't my son anymore. Maybe it never had been. I handed him the keys, and he pocketed them. We need to talk, he said. Sit down. I sat at the kitchen table. Brandon paced back and forth like Richard used to do before an explosion. You ruined everything today, he said. Do you understand that? We had a plan. A good plan. Everyone would have been taken care of, but you had to be difficult. Brandon, they're planning to lock me in a psychiatric facility based on forged medical documents. It's not like that, he snapped. Oak Hills is a nice place. You'd be comfortable there. Safe. Safe from what? From yourself. He slammed his hand on the table. You're not thinking clearly, Mom. You haven't been for a while. We're trying to help you. By stealing my money and my house? It's not stealing. It's managing your affairs because you can't anymore. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt something inside me turn to ice. Brandon, do you remember what I taught you when you were little? About the difference between right and wrong? Don't do that, he said. Don't try to guilt-trip me with your teacher voice. I'm not guilt-tripping you. I'm reminding you. Because somewhere in there, underneath Cynthia's manipulation and your father's greed, there might still be a piece of the boy I raised. For just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or regret. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it, and whatever I had seen vanished. Dad and Cynthia are coming back. They have a new plan. He looked at me. And this time, Mom, you're not going to have a choice. The new plan arrived 20 minutes later in the form of Richard, Cynthia, and a man I had never seen before. He was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like a lawyer, but the kind who didn't ask too many questions about his clients. Alice, Richard said, his voice oily with false concern. This is Mr. Gerald Whitmore. He's a notary public, and he's here to help us complete some important paperwork. Mr. Whitmore nodded at me professionally. Mrs. Davenport, I understand you've been under some stress lately. Your family is concerned about you, and they've asked me to witness some documents that will ensure you're properly cared for. I'm not signing anything, I said. Mom, Brandon said, sitting down next to me and taking my hand. His grip was tight, too tight. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're doing this for your own good. If you have to force someone to do something for their own good, I said, then maybe it's not actually good for them. Cynthia sighed dramatically. This is exactly what we've been dealing with. The paranoia, the resistance to help. It's heartbreaking. Mr. Whitmore pulled papers from his briefcase. Mrs. Davenport, these are simple medical power of attorney documents. They allow your husband to make healthcare decisions on your behalf if you're unable to do so. Very standard for people your age. I'm 59 years old, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Of course you are, Mr. Whitmore said smoothly. This is just a precaution. Now, if you'll just sign here. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Richard's face went dark. Who the hell is that? I'll get it, Cynthia said, but I stood up faster. It's my house. I'll get it. I walked to the front door with my heart pounding, praying it was who I hoped it was. When I opened the door, I saw a woman in her 40s with short gray hair, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a briefcase that looked far more professional than Mr. Whitmore's. Alice Davenport? She asked. Yes. I'm Patricia Morse. We spoke on the phone. May I come in? Behind me, I heard Richard's voice, sharp with panic. Who is that? My attorney, I said, stepping aside to let Patricia enter. Patricia walked into the living room like she owned it, her eyes sweeping over the scene. The notary with his papers, Richard standing with clenched fists, Cynthia pale and nervous, Brandon caught between confusion and fear. Good evening, Patricia said pleasantly. I'm Patricia Morse, attorney at law. I represent Mrs. Davenport. I understand there's been some confusion about legal documents. There's no confusion, Richard said. This is a family matter. We don't need lawyers. Actually, Mr. Davenport, when you attempt to coerce someone into signing legal documents under duress, you absolutely need lawyers, preferably criminal defense lawyers. Patricia pulled a folder from her briefcase. But let me introduce the other guests who will be joining us. As if on cue, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Mrs. Davenport? The first officer said. He was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes. I'm Officer Michael Torres. We received a call from Ms. Morse about a possible situation here. May we come in? Richard's face had gone from red to white. This is insane. Alice, what have you done? I protected myself, I said. Officer Torres and his partner, Officer Sarah Chen, entered the living room. Mr. Whitmore had already started packing up his papers, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Patricia addressed the room. Let me explain what's going to happen now. Mrs. Davenport has documented extensive evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and attempted illegal commitment to a psychiatric facility. She has photographs of 7 cigarette burns inflicted by her husband. She has bank records showing $8,500 stolen from joint accounts. She has documents proving a secret second mortgage of $125,000. And most interestingly, she pulled out a paper and held it up. I recognized it. The email from Cynthia about Dr. Lehman. She has evidence that Mrs. Cynthia Davenport, a licensed nurse, conspired to fabricate medical records and bribe a physician to sign false psychiatric commitment papers. That's not just fraud. That's a felony that will cost you your nursing license forever. Cynthia's face crumbled. We weren't actually going to. The email is very clear about your intentions, Patricia said, as are the intake forms already filled out for Oak Hills, claiming Mrs. Davenport has conditions she doesn't have, signed by a doctor she's never met. Brandon stood up abruptly. Wait. What email? What doctor? He looked at Cynthia, then at Richard. What is she talking about? Brandon, shut up, Richard hissed. No, Brandon said, his voice rising. What doctor? What intake forms? Patricia pulled out more papers. These intake forms, the ones dated 3 months ago. The ones claiming your mother has advanced dementia and paranoid delusions. The ones signed by Dr. Robert Lehman of Oak Hills Psychiatric Facility, who your wife paid $5,000 to sign without ever examining the patient. Brandon grabbed the papers from Patricia's hand and read them. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized what he was reading. 3 months, he whispered. You've been planning this for 3 months? Brandon, you knew what we were doing, Cynthia snapped. Don't act innocent now. I knew we were going to get her to sign the power of attorney. I knew about managing her finances. But this? He held up the psychiatric forms. You told me it was just temporary. You told me it was for her own safety. You never said anything about paying off doctors or fake medical records. Because you're weak, Cynthia said viciously. Just like her. You would have ruined everything with your guilt. Brandon turned to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Mom, I didn't know about this. I swear I didn't know about the fake medical records. But you knew about stealing my money, I said quietly. You knew about drugging me. You knew about forcing me to sign documents. You knew about Oak Hills. I thought... His voice broke. I thought it was the only way. Dad said you'd be safe there. He said you'd be taken care of. He lied to you, I said. Just like he's been lying to both of us for 32 years. Officer Torres stepped forward. Mr. Richard Davenport, I'm placing you under arrest for domestic violence, fraud, and conspiracy. Mrs. Cynthia Davenport, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and practicing nursing with intent to harm. As the officers read them their rights and put them in handcuffs, Richard tried one last time. Alice, you're making a mistake. I'm your husband. We can work this out. No, Richard, I said. We can't. Officer Chen turned to Brandon. Mr. Davenport, you're not under arrest at this time, but we'll need you to come to the station for questioning. Brandon nodded numbly. Before he left, he turned to me one more time. Mom, I'm so sorry. I really thought I was helping. I thought you'd be safe. Brandon, I said, you chose money over your mother. Whether you understood the full plan or not, you made that choice. And now you have to live with it. I watched them all leave, Richard and Cynthia in handcuffs, Brandon walking behind them like a ghost, Mr. Whitmore practically running to his car. When the door closed, Patricia sat down next to me. You did well, Alice. This was incredibly brave. What happens now? Now? Richard will be charged with multiple felonies. With the cigarette burns documented and the pattern of financial abuse, he's looking at significant prison time. Cynthia will lose her nursing license and face fraud charges. Brandon's involvement is complicated. He was complicit, but he may not have known the full extent. That'll be up to the prosecutor. And me? Patricia smiled. You get your life back. Your accounts will be frozen pending investigation. But with the evidence we have, you'll recover your money. The house is yours free and clear. The second mortgage was fraudulent. And you'll never have to see Richard again unless it's in a courtroom. After Patricia left, I sat alone in my living room for the first time in days. My arm still hurt. The burns were still there. But something else was different. I was free. The trial took place in February, 6 months after that night when everything changed. I sat in the courtroom wearing a navy blue dress and a silk scarf that covered the scars on my neck. The burns had healed, but they had left marks. Permanent reminders of what my husband had done to me. Richard sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. His bail had been set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay because all the accounts were frozen. His lawyer was a public defender who looked tired and overworked. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Hartley, had told me that Richard's case was one of the strongest she'd ever seen. "The documentation you provided was extraordinary," she'd said. "Most domestic violence cases come down to he said, she said. But you gave us a roadmap to conviction." The trial lasted 3 days. The jury heard from Dr. Ellis, who testified about the cigarette burns. They heard from the bank manager, who explained the fraudulent withdrawals. They heard from Patricia Morse, who walked them through every piece of evidence I had gathered. They heard from Officer Torres, who described the scene when they arrested Richard. And they heard from me. I sat on the witness stand and told them everything. The 32 years of gambling addiction, the stolen money, the burns, the conspiracy. I showed them the scars. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just told the truth in a clear, steady voice. When Richard's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to suggest I had burned myself for attention, I looked directly at the jury and said, "I spent 32 years protecting this man's secrets. Why would I suddenly decide to burn myself 7 times, go to a hospital and expose everything I'd been hiding? That doesn't make sense. What makes sense is that he finally went too far, and I finally had enough." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Margaret Reynolds sentenced Richard to 8 years in prison. "Mr. Davenport," she said, looking at him with barely concealed disgust, "you systematically abused, defrauded, and attempted to imprison your wife. You forged documents, stole money, and inflicted physical torture. The only reason you're not getting more time is because of your age. But make no mistake, 8 years at your age is effectively a life sentence." Richard tried to look at me as they led him away. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I looked straight ahead, feeling nothing. Cynthia's trial was separate and happened a month later. The nursing board had already revoked her license permanently before the trial even began. The photos of her email about paying Dr. Lehman $5,000 for fraudulent commitment papers had been enough. At her trial, she tried to blame everything on Richard. "He manipulated me," she testified. "I was scared of him. He said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt me too." But the prosecutor presented the email evidence. Cynthia's emails weren't written by someone who was scared. They were written by someone who was calculating, greedy, and in complete control. One email in particular sealed her fate. "Once the old woman is locked up, we can liquidate everything. Brandon's too soft to do this himself. We have to push it through." The old woman, that's what I was to her. Not Brandon's mother, not a person, just an obstacle worth $310,000. The jury found her guilty in 2 hours. Judge Reynolds gave her 5 years and permanent loss of custody of her 2 children. Cynthia's parents took the kids, 2 little boys I'd never been allowed to really know, and moved to Pennsylvania. When Cynthia was sentenced, she screamed at me across the courtroom, "You destroyed my life! You destroyed my family!" I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said clearly, "No, you destroyed your own life when you decided my life was worth less than my money." Brandon was never charged. The prosecutor determined that while he was complicit and knew about the power of attorney plan, he genuinely hadn't known about the forged medical records or the extent of the conspiracy. He cut a deal: full testimony against Richard and Cynthia in exchange for immunity. But immunity from prison isn't the same as immunity from consequences. Brandon lost his job at First National Bank. When the case became public, the bank couldn't keep an employee who had participated in financial elder abuse. His background check was flagged permanently. He couldn't work in banking or finance ever again. Cynthia filed for divorce from prison. Her attorney took him for everything: half the house he'd just bought, half his savings, half his 401k. She claimed he'd abandoned her and the children. The irony was perfect. Brandon had conspired to steal my money and ended up with nothing himself. He wrote me letters, dozens of them over 6 months. They all said the same thing in different ways. "I'm sorry. I was manipulated. I didn't understand. Please forgive me. Please don't abandon me." I never opened them after the first one. I told Barbara, my sister, to throw away any mail from Brandon. She asked me once if I was sure. "Barbara," I said. "He stood in my kitchen and told me I was going to Oak Hills whether I wanted to or not. He held my hand too tight while his father tried to burn me again. He knew I was being drugged. He knew money was being stolen. Maybe he didn't know every detail, but he knew enough. And he chose to participate anyway." "But he's your son," Barbara said quietly. "No," I said. "A son protects his mother. What I had was a stranger who shared my DNA and wanted my house." In March, 1 year after the cigarette burns, I sold the house on Maple Street. The market was good, and I got $305,000. With the recovered stolen money, $78,500, the settlement from the fraudulent mortgage lawsuit, $95,000, and the civil judgment against Richard and Cynthia, $180,000 that they'd be paying off for the rest of their lives, I had $658,500, more money than I'd ever had in my life. I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, near Barbara and her husband Tom. I bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in a building with security and a doorman. I furnished it simply, with things I chose myself, not things Richard allowed me to have. I set up a trust fund for Cynthia's children, $50,000 each, accessible only when they turned 25, with the strict legal requirement that their parents could never touch it. It was the perfect revenge, helping innocent children while ensuring the people who tried to rob me would never see a penny. I volunteered at a women's shelter, teaching English and helping women file protection orders. I knew their stories because I'd lived their story. Dr. Ellis visited me sometimes for coffee. Patricia Morse became a friend. I didn't date. I didn't look for another relationship. I had spent 32 years tied to a man who hurt me. Now I wanted to know what it felt like to be completely, entirely, only mine. On New Year's Eve, I sat on my apartment balcony watching fireworks over Ann Arbor. My phone rang. Unknown number. I looked at it for a long moment, then declined the call and blocked the number. 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a delivery person with an envelope. I opened the door. "Yes? Letter for Alice Davenport?" I took it. The return address was the county jail, Richard's handwriting. I didn't open it. I walked to my kitchen, turned on the gas stove, and held the envelope over the flame. It caught fire quickly, and I watched it burn in the sink. The ashes washing away down the drain, just like the cigarette ash had fallen from Richard's lighter onto my skin a year ago. Then I made myself tea, went back to the balcony, and watched the last fireworks of the old year fade into darkness. My phone buzzed. A text from Barbara. "Happy New Year, Alice. Proud of you." I texted back, "Happy New Year. Thank you for everything." Another text came through. "Brandon, from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. Mom, please, it's New Year's. Can we talk? I've lost everything. I need you." I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I typed, "You made your choice. Live with it." I blocked the number. The last firework exploded overhead, gold and silver, bright against the dark sky. I raised my teacup to it, a silent toast to the woman I'd become. The woman who had survived. The woman who had fought back. The woman who had chosen herself. I was 60 years old. I had scars on my arm, my neck, my back, and my thigh. I had no husband, no son, no family except Barbara, but I had something more valuable than any of that. I had my freedom. I had my peace. I had my life, and I would never, ever give it away again.